welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something a bit puzzling in business. Why is it that even with all this amazing tech, endless data, so many supply chains just seem to fall short? Do you really think we'd have it figured out by now?
It's a great question. And, it's often not really about the technology itself, is it? The real issue frequently comes down to a kind of fundamental disconnect, a mismatch. Businesses they're basically trying to push one kind of product through a supply chain that was built for something else entirely.
Right. That's the core paradox, all this tech muscle. But the mistake is often, simpler than you'd think. So our mission in this deep dive is really to unpack Marshall Fisher's brilliant framework. It's from his Harvard Business Review article, What is the Right Supply Chain for Your Product?
Right.
We want to give you a really powerful, but actually quite simple way to look at your products, classify them, and then match them to the supply chain strategy that's actually going to work. This is how you avoid those, costly screw-ups and unlock real efficiency.
Exactly. That core problem, the mismatch between product type and supply chain strategy, that's precisely what we need to dig into. It's really the heart of his argument.
Okay, so to really get this, Fisher gives us a crucial starting point, doesn't he? It starts with looking at the products themselves, categorizing them based on, how people buy them, their demand patterns.
Precisely. He splits them into two main types. First up, you've got what he calls functional products. Think of these as, your everyday things, toothpaste, canned soup, basic stuff like that. Demand is really predictable, pretty steady. They tend to have long life cycles, maybe 2 years or even more. Margins are usually kind of low, say 5 to 20%. And there's not a ton of variety. For these kinds of products, the main goal, the strategy is super clear. Keep costs as low as possible. Minimize costs, because every little bit you save goes straight to the bottom line.
That makes total sense for staples, the everyday items. But then what about the other side of the coin? The products that aren't steady and predictable, the ones that are always changing.
Yes. That brings us to innovative products, and these are almost the complete opposite. Demand is incredibly unpredictable, sometimes chaotic even. Life cycles, much shorter, think maybe 3 months, maybe up to a year, but the profit margins are way higher, often 20 to 60%. And you usually see tons of variety, like fashion or the newest tech gadgets. For these, the goal totally shifts. It's not about pinching pennies anymore. It's about managing all that uncertainty. It's about being super responsive to whatever the market wants right now.
It's such a basic difference, really, when you put it like that. Functional versus innovative. And just understanding that distinction, how a product behaves, seems like the essential first step.
Oh, absolutely. It's foundational. If you don't get that right, you're kind of, building on shady ground from the start.
Okay, so let's say you've done that. You've looked at your products, figured out if they're functional or innovative. How do you then build the right supply chain? Because clearly, one size definitely does not fit all here.
Right. That's where the two types of supply chains come into play. For those predictable, functional products, you need what Fisher calls physically efficient chains. Their whole reason for being, their design, is just laser focused on cutting costs, getting the most out of your factories and warehouses and keeping inventory super, super lean. A classic example he gives is Campbell's soup. They brought in this continuous replenishment program with retailers, and it was amazing. It cut the amount of soup sitting in retailer warehouses by half. 50%. That's pure efficiency.
Yeah, 50% is huge. Okay, so that's for the steady eddies. But for the unpredictable, fast-moving, innovative products, Fisher calls them market-responsive chains. So what's their focus? Because this is like a totally different ballgame.
It absolutely is. Priorities here are things like speed, flexibility. They often use buffer stocks, that's like planned extra inventory strategically placed so they can react really fast. And they need an almost instant reaction to demand signals. What's selling, what's not. What's fascinating, really, is seeing how each chain type is so specifically tailored. Take Sport Obermeyer, the skiwear company. They use something called an accurate response system. Basically, they waited longer to make final decisions on styles and quantities until they had a clear picture of demand. And it cut their costs from making too much or too little by half. Again, 50%. Or think about National Bicycle in Japan. Mass customization. They could deliver custom-fit bikes made to order with 99.99% on-time delivery. That's responsiveness.
Okay, this all sounds incredibly logical. Classify product, match chain. Seems straightforward. But we know businesses mess this up constantly. So what actually happens when you have that mismatch? What are the real-world consequences, the cost?
Oh, the cost of getting it wrong is huge. And often it's kind of hidden until things really go off the rails. If you try, say, pushing an innovative product like a hot new gadget through an efficient, slow-moving chain, You're going to get killed by stockouts when demand spikes because you just can't react fast enough. And then you'll have massive markdowns later on the stuff that didn't sell because you guessed wrong on production. Think about the auto industry, right? Dealers often have like 90 days of inventory sitting on the lot. That's a ton of cash tied up. That's often a sign of an efficient chain struggling with somewhat innovative product.
90 days. Wow. Okay. And the other way around, using a fancy responsive chain for something basic.
Well, yeah, using a responsive chain which is built for speed and flexibility and usually costs more for a simple functional product. You're basically just wasting money. You're paying for speed you don't need. You're incurring higher costs for a product where the only game that matters is minimizing cost.
Yeah.
It's just inefficient spending.
So it bleeds cash either way if you mismatch. Okay, so how do you fix it if you realize you've got it wrong? Fisher offers ways to realign, right?
Yes, he does. And they're quite elegant, actually. Two main strategies. First, you can try to move products left on his chart. That means simplifying innovative products to make them more like functional ones. Maybe you reduce the number of variations or try to extend the product's life cycle somehow. Procter & Gamble, for example, did this years ago. They drastically cut the number of toothpaste versions they offered, made the whole supply chain much easier, much more efficient to manage.
Okay, simplify the product itself. What's the second strategy?
The second is to move supply chains down. This means building more responsiveness into your supply chain, especially for those innovative products, even if it costs a bit more sometimes. Compaq, back in the PC wars, did this. They kept some assembly closer to their main markets, like in Europe or the US, instead of relying only on faraway factories in Asia. It gave them flexibility, let them react faster to demand shifts.
So change the product or change the chain. Makes sense. But even if you know the framework, there are still ways to trip up, aren't there? What are some common pitfalls that businesses fall into, even when they're trying to apply these ideas?
Oh, definitely. Pitfalls abound. One really big one is relying too heavily on promotions, especially for functional products. Promotions seem great, right? Boost sales. But they create these artificial spikes in demand. Totally unpredictable. It messes up the smooth, efficient flow that functional chains need. Campbell's Soup, again, they struggled with this. Retailers would do forward buying load up during a cheap promotion and then basically stop ordering for months. It completely wrecked Campbell's production planning.
Right, so the promotion actually hurts the efficiency it's supposed to help in the long run. Interesting. Any other traps?
Another major one is what Fisher termed schizophrenia in goals. This is where a company knows it has an innovative product that needs a responsive chain. But internally, they're still measuring everything and rewarding people based on old-school efficiency metrics, like cost per unit. PC companies often fell into this. They needed to be fast and flexible for new models, but their operations were still obsessed with pure factory efficiency. It creates this impossible conflict. It really makes you ask, do your internal metrics, your goals, actually line up with what your product needs, or are they fighting each other?
That's a really critical point, internal alignment. Okay, so this seems almost simple on the surface. Classify your product, build the right chain, avoid the pitfalls. But let's bring it back to you, the listener. What are the really actionable things you can take away from this? What should you do now?
Yeah, absolutely. Actionable takeaways. Number one, and honestly the most critical, always classify your products first. Use those key factors. Demand predictability, life cycle, margins. Be honest about what kind of product you really have. Then number two, match the chain. It sounds obvious now, but it's crucial. Functional products, they absolutely need those physically efficient chains. Relentless cost cutting. Innovative products, you must have market responsive chains. Embrace flexibility, speed, even if it costs a bit more upfront.
Classify, then match.
Got it.
On. And you mentioned collaboration earlier. That seems like the third key action. It's not just an internal thing.
Not at all. That's key action number 3. Collaboration up and down the chain is vital, but how you collaborate depends on the product type. For functional products, you need deep cooperation across the entire chain specifically to drive down total costs. Not just your costs, but everyone's. Campbell's use of EDI, that's electronic data interchange, basically computers talking directly to each other for orders and inventory with their retailers, is a perfect example. Smooth information flow equals lower costs for everyone. But for innovative products, collaboration looks different. It's much more about sharing information, sharing data to hedge against all that uncertainty. Think back to Sport Obermeyer working closely with retailers to get those early forecasts. That shared intel was gold. It allowed them to make much smarter bets on production and cut their risk way down.
Okay, so classify, match, and then collaborate appropriately, either for cost reduction or for uncertainty reduction. So wrapping this up, the core message really seems to be aligning your product strategy with your supply chain design.
Mm.
It's not just like a nice to have, it's fundamental.
Mhm.
It's essential if you want to cut costs, improve service, and stop having these broken chains, as Fisher puts it.
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought to leave you with. If you connect this to the bigger picture, just think for a moment. How many products you use every day that feel innovative new features, short life cycles, but are probably being managed by a supply chain that's still stuck in efficient mode? Think about the opportunities that might exist there for companies that really get this framework, that truly understand how to align product and chain. It's quite powerful when you start looking for it.